I hope you will return tomorrow for some of our workshop sessions throughout the day, and then also our poetry slam tomorrow evening. Those will all be found at the same Zoom link. So we've made it easy for you. I want to say a few words before we begin. First, some Zoom etiquette. Although I was thinking about this today, after a year, maybe we don't need it, but just to remind folks, right? If the participants here tonight, if our audience could keep yourself muted through our talk, and then when we move into the Q&A session, you can unmute. If you would like to ask a question, I'll be moderating that session. You can also type your question into the chat and I will elevate those up for the discussion. I think we also talked about folks might want to select speaker view in your view choices, right? Did we talk about that? I think those would appear in your upper right-hand corner. Speaker view allows the person who's speaking to be more prominent if you want that, or you can look at all of us at the same time. The other thing I wanted to do is tell you a little bit about the origin of this program. So this program came about in the wake of January 6th. After that horrific event, I began to think about ways that we could all get together and learn some practical skills for communicating across differences. Any types of differences, differences of experience, differences in values, political beliefs. Communicate in a more productive manner, okay, rather than destructive. I also wanted to think about the role of creativity in this, ways to channel strong emotions that we might be having, whatever those are. And if we could learn ways to channel those emotions, again, productively, to think about how we can get to know ourselves, get to know others, create community, and then perhaps working together towards social change. So this is what I hope will happen perhaps after these sessions. And I hope that you all, again, will join us tomorrow for some of these workshops. The last thing I want to do is thank some people. I want to specifically thank President Bateman. I proposed this idea to him and he said, yes, let's do it right away. So thank you for your support, President Bateman. I really, really appreciate it. Also I want to say thank you to the Kennedy Fitzgerald Fund, which is sponsoring the program. We're really lucky to have that fund and to be able to use it for timely matters like this. Also to the committee that I worked with who made this program possible, would never have happened without my wonderful colleagues. I'll just briefly introduce them here. Danielle Currier from the Sociology Department, Leslie Shipley from Art History, Justina Licata, who is our visiting Ainsworth Scholar in American Culture, Suzanne Bessinger in Religious Studies, Mari Ishibashi in Political Science and Global Studies, one of our students, a first-year student, Noah Bryant Hooper, who will be introducing one of our speakers tomorrow. I'm thrilled that he was involved. And last but not least, the incredible Steve Willis, who is our assistant to the president and secretary to the Board of Trustees. I want to thank all of you. I'm really grateful for your time and energy that you devoted to putting this on. And it could never have happened without all of you. And plus, it was such a pleasure to work together to put together something that's again going to be productive and helpful and help us all think about how we can work together to make change. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who will introduce our speaker for tonight. Is there anything else I should cover before I do that, friends and colleagues? Okay, turn it over to Steve, and I'm going to mute myself now.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I want to take just a moment to acknowledge Jennifer. This was her idea and her notion, and it's been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to work with her. Jennifer and I have become good friends because we discovered over the course of the pandemic how much we both love movies. And so it's been a pleasure to work with her to see this event to fruition. And so Jennifer, big ups to you for making this come together. So congratulations. When we began to talk as a committee about who we might ask to be our keynote speaker, the first person who came to my mind is actually the person who is our speaker tonight. Treney Tweedy. I have had the opportunity during my time in Lynchburg to spend a little bit of time with her and hear her speak. And when we talk about civil discourse, I could not think of anyone who I thought would help us come to the table to talk about that topic any better than our former mayor of Lynchburg, Treney Tweedy. She is currently, of course, an at-large member of the council, city council, and she is a native of Lynchburg. She graduated from E.C. Glass High School. She graduated from the Lynchburg College with her bachelor's degree in English. And of course, she went on to graduate again from the University of Lynchburg with an MBA. She worked as a journalist for the US Navy, and she is a mother and the youngest looking grandmother that I think I have ever seen. So amazing to know that. She spent 6 years on the Lynchburg City School Board, 2 years as vice chair. And I have to say, and I've said this to her before, so it's no surprise to her, when I think of calm, cool, and collected, I immediately think of our former mayor. And knowing Lynchburg, knowing her, knowing some of the issues that she has dealt with during her time in office, I have never seen her flustered. I've never seen her raise her voice. And so when I think of civil discourse, I could think of no one better to help us come to the table to talk about this topic. She is a woman who believes that helping others is a lifetime priority. So I invite you to welcome former Mayor of Lynchburg, Treney Tweedy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve, for that introduction. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to be here. I'm honored to be back at Randolph. Although we're not in person, the world is a little different now, but I consider Randolph like another home sometimes, in the sense of my comfortability of speaking to groups and sharing with you. So thank you for inviting me this evening. And the topic, it gave me, I been thinking about it for a while, didn't know where to go. Civil disobedience and civility. And in order to share a few of my thoughts, I think I had to reflect on my own feelings and my own experiences, which is, I know, what most of you are here for. But there's a lot of things wrapped around that. And so just come with me on this journey this evening right now for just a few moments. I won't take too long, but I'm going to let you inside my world right now. So my personal experiences in the leadership roles I've had, the great opportunity to serve in this city of Lynchburg. And what I will say is that with Zoom, I'm still learning how to navigate my eyes, glasses. I'm navigating, am I looking at you? Am I looking at the screen? So bear with me. I'll just say that. I'm not a Zoom expert yet. But civil disobedience, what I want you to remember most through what I'm about to say is that they shout, I whisper. They shout, we whisper. So my few months after leaving the mayor's seat, I've had a lot of time to think and to reflect and to restore. That was my purpose. That was my intention for kind of walking away at a good moment, to walk away at what I perceive to be the top of my game for myself, and to understand greater where I've been, what I've been doing, and why have I been doing it. I'm grateful for the opportunity of sharing these thoughts with you this evening. And as I said, it took me a minute to kind of gather myself around what I wanted to tell you. But first, I wanted to share what I've learned in sitting in my various roles as a volunteer board member, a council member at large, the vice mayor, and then I was able to see the landscape from different levels and platforms. My service, if you will, has allowed me to assess my leadership style, and it has allowed me to practice my leadership style, not only to fully engage with others and people in the community, but to also assess myself and to look deeply within. How do I do things? how do I operate the way I do, and how do I handle what is done to me, and what do I want to make through all of it? You start to think, when you're in these roles and when you're in this seat and when you're in these discussions and dialogues, who likes me? Who hates me? Who's excited about the things that I get excited about? And who wants to try to stop me from doing what I believe are the right things for a community, or try to stop us from doing the right things for people in the community? I've always believed that it is better to work together rather than splintered and apart. And so when you're trying to help a community or a cause, there comes a moment when you realize that many people in our society will do anything for self-preservation. And you say to yourself, I get it. I understand why they're trying to preserve their culture, their way of life, their presence and identity, their superiority. So then you have to look at yourself and say, am I willing to go? You ask yourself, what am I willing to sacrifice in the name of fighting for the cause, standing my ground? How revolutionary am I willing to get? What will I sacrifice personally, professionally, socially? Who will I sacrifice? A discussion about civil disobedience to me has to begin here. You have to be willing to personally reflect. When and where do I draw my line in the sand for civil disobedience? And I would pose all of you to ask yourself that question. For me, it was a moment when I said, I understand King a little better now. I understand that when I say King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had to have a reality check, a conversation with himself, a realization moment, quite frankly, that someone wants to kill him. Someone, if I were in his shoes, someone wants to kill me. Someone wants to harm me for what I believe in, what he's fighting for, his quest for freedom for all, if you will. And I had that moment by myself through some kind of turbulent, challenging discussions and meetings and dialogues. And I remember thinking, how did he and others like him get through that moment? He knew that he could die because he was trying to help people, a particular group of people. Then it hit me. I don't know, it just started coming into my space, my mind. I haven't seen many photographs of Dr. King engaged in lighthearted moments with his family. I've rarely seen him in casual clothes, photographs of him in casual clothes, and vacation photos with friends, letting down his hair, celebrations at cookouts or the birthday parties, and I'm sure they exist somewhere in the family personal archives and deeply put away in friends' drawers and photo albums. But we as the public, as the community, have we seen much about his personal life, his existence outside of the movement, the footage of him walking around casually in the streets with his friends and family? And, are there other pieces of footage that we've not seen him other than at the table, if you will, of strategy and planning? In that moment, reflecting and thinking about his reality, he probably said, I could stop, I could turn around, I could not complete this. I could maybe half-heartedly move forward. But then there was the other side, I imagine, saying that the weight is so heavy, but the purpose is so great. And if I stop, would the outcome be the same? If I stop, would we get to the other side? If I stop, this cause might stop. And so for a moment in my own small world, my own reflection pool, I asked myself, what am I, Trinae, willing to sacrifice to stand up for people and for causes? I put myself in this position, in his skin for a moment. sacrifice it all, even at my level, locally, for what I did here. And what did that mean? At that time, at that moment, I said to myself, I can't stop. I have to keep going. There is no turning around, but there's also a better way to navigate through this. So what I learned through my experiences, my reflections, is that when people are in opposition or having opposing viewpoint, they go to some nasty extremes. I'm just gonna go there. They go to some very nasty extremes. And those extremes are often and can be unscrupulous, deceitful, unhinged. They can be violent, and they're sometimes deadly, unfortunately, depending on the people that are engaged in the battle of ideologies and perspectives and livelihoods and cultures. You really see another side of people that you would not ordinarily see. How many of you have heard that song, or the OJ song, "They Smile in Your Face"? Oh, I won't go further because you didn't invite me to sing. I understand that. But what I learned is I could choose to engage them in the same ways they are engaging me. I could attack, be plotting, be cunningly deceitful, and strategize against them to cause the detriment and harm that they were trying to cause me. I could spend a lot of time trying to create those gotcha moments. But then I had some spiritual awakening, a personal awakening, a moment that I said, that's not my best self. There are a few ways that type of thinking can end, and none of it is what I desired for myself. And let's just be for real. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want to go to jail. I've never been to jail. I don't want that badge. That is not my lane of civil disobedience. When the cause is great enough and the opposition is loud enough, the civil disobedience, my civil disobedience, goes into retreat, into reflection, into the resolve to think, to look, to contemplate, to see the enemy's opposition. In 2021, my civil disobedience hero is Stacey Abrams. Yes, it is. Hands up for her, hands down. That's my civil disobedience hero. To see the enemy's game plan, you go into your own personal space. When you see the opposition, the strategy, imagine retreating into your own space or war room, if you will, with targets in your eyes. What I mean, because I know I have people on and I am not a gamer, so I will tell you that. But life sometimes means you have to play the games and learn the rules, and you see things through certain lenses. You're identifying your targets of the movement and the situation. You're seeing how the opposition responds, how they move, and then engage with you, how their tactics are being spilled out. You become your own intelligence officer. Every meeting, every encounter is a reconnaissance effort. Those efforts, that information gathered, if you will, allows you to come back into your own personal war room and reflect on, how do you use this? What is the breadth and the depth of the opposition? What are the outcomes that you hope to gain? And so if you are always shouting like the enemy is, you can't hear yourself think in the war room. You can't hear yourself at the moment of engagement and battle and the words and strategize at the moment of attack. For strategy, you need more energy for every battle to win the war. So disobedience, my resistance, is strategizing and real thinking about how to win against an opposition. This is my civil disobedience. Others may be different. But my civil disobedience allows me the space and the place to bring all of my intelligence into my own war room. And then I retreat. I whisper. I analyze. I really don't want the enemy to know I'm coming. That's my civil disobedience. So they shout and I whisper. I tell people my experience of being in my roles as a public servant, as a Black woman in a public servant role, you wear a lot of targets. Let's just say that, and you don't know whether the aim is coming for your back, your head, your heart, your feet, in front of you or behind you. You reach the point of whether you go forward or not. Um, how do you protect yourself? How do you protect your family, your pathway, if you will? I let everyone know politics today is not for the faint of heart. Just ask a few of our congressional senators and House members, or those who personally experienced the events of the 2021 insurrection on January 6th at the Capitol. We live in a time that civil disobedience is front and center and is a part of what I believe is the necessary change that is taking place in our time. Throughout society, without resistance, there has been no change. This is our moment to impact lives and systems for generations to come. But what does that mean? What will it take? What are we trying to change? What is the greatest opposition or suppression that we are experiencing? Is it worth the effort? I know all of you probably have so many thoughts running through your head about what that greatest oppression and suppression is. And we would probably agree on several of them. And no matter which one we pick, is it worth the effort to resist and seek? Hell yeah, hell yeah, and hell yeah. Civil disobedience, the refusal to comply with certain laws or to pay taxes and fines as a political form of protest. Synonyms: rebellion, revolt, uprising, mutiny, revolution, insurgency, coup d'etat, unrest, anarchy. You understand what I'm saying. I know that you know the definitions already, and it used to be an unlikely behavior in our country in more recent years. Yes, we all have seen and witnessed and maybe participated in the protests and the marches, and some would even call the anarchy in our streets. This type of behavior was experienced decades ago, centuries long gone. We have been so far removed in our comfortable seats and lives from the bloodshed for equality and the idea that we must fight for our inalienable rights. Uh, and that's, oh, but by the way, if some count from the beginning for some of those rights, or so we thought we were far removed, or were we just sleeping at the wheel? So much time has lapsed between the years of protests, nonviolent sit-ins, marches, war on our domestic soil. Yet here we are. These behaviors of civil disobedience are just a part of another regular news cycle for us now. Recently, these words have become our new norm almost, if we accept that new norm. As a society, we have, in my opinion, become desensitized to the idea of civil disobedience and its synonyms because maybe we have accepted the idiocracy of racism and classism. And we've accepted that the rich should not be faulted for being rich, and it is poor people's fault that they are poor. If I could indulge you a moment, my poetic side tends to creep into my speaking side. So we have become comfortable with the atrocities of people of color lives being devalued and taken away by the trigger happy racist hand of a small percentage of society's protectors. It only seems to cause the blood of Black and brown people stain the white picket fences of America's neighborhoods and streets. It's okay. They deserve it or brought it upon themselves. They did something to deserve the outcome. Oh, that is who they are. And then we proceeded on with our lives while communities are left wondering why. Traumatized families and friends, neighbors are left to pick up the pieces, shattered lives never to be the same. The piercing of poverty through the soul of communities accepted, overlooked, excused. How long must we endure the pain of society's ills? How long must I, who look like me, seem to be strange fruit to some? How long should you be allowed to pin a Black man down, your knee in his neck, for what we now know to be a 9.5-minute session saying, I can't breathe, as the world watches his spirit leave his body on camera? How many no-knock warrants should we accept as a routine procedure in our legal system when the only people who seem to suffer the injustices of it all are the Breonna Taylors of the world, who look like me, like daughter that I have, sons I have, like my grandsons? When I complain or protest over all that has happened, when is a convenient time for you that I or we display my or our civil disobedience? Is 400 plus years of the burdens of our ancestors, the weight they had to carry of being ostracized, castrated, raped, beaten, maimed, muted, deprived, and suppressed, enough time for you to feel comfortable in your skin, for me to display my Black pride, Black brilliance, Black talent, Black power, and Black courage? The latest round of civil disobedience did not start with Black Lives Matter. In 1845, Thoreau began his civil disobedience against President Polk. Thoreau did not like Polk and was opposed to him. In Thoreau's 1849 civil disobedience, he questioned what a citizen should do about a president that citizens did not like. He suggested that citizens should follow their conscience and their own reasoning. But following their own conscience and reasoning to what end? Against a society that often institutionalized violence and suppression of opposing voices and thought to the point of being jailed, bought, sold, and even death. Come forward many years today. Understand there is only one plan of evil in this world. And every generation, in some form and through someone, itself to possibly get a renewed and reinvigorated hold. And in every generation, there is an opposing force that fights the noble fight against the evil oppressor. So today, we can revisit the wars of the past, the fights for freedom, the strategies for justice. We can reimagine the war room given all of the new intelligence we have. As a leader during the past several years, there have been numerous times that I shared my opposing opinions and lend my voice to a social justice issue or cause. In my roles, I have always believed that it is important to do the right thing, make the decisions and create the strategies that would make situations of life better for people, or neighborhoods or communities. Participate in the dialogue, wrestle policies and regulations, listen to opposing viewpoints, share my own viewpoints and perspectives, hash through it all toward a greater outcome. Meet, discuss, hash it out, go home, breathe, wake up the next day, do it all again. My routine, my purpose. But one day, my purpose became real for me. After a series of events or situations, I went thinking, sincerely thinking, reflecting again about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his life, his death, and all the in between. I thought about the moment that he realized he, again, would die for his quest for freedom for all. My time of leadership often seems like a blur. So many days and events that happen. But the day I saw Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in another light was particularly the two debates and issues of the day at the moment, which one for me was gaining approval and funding to place a sidewalk on one side of town. And when the request came before my council, our council, to approve or not approve our city being a Second Amendment sanctuary city. During these debates and discussions and meetings, I had to decide whether I was going to shout or whether I would whisper. And so I realized early on in life the power of whispering during all life's most strenuous moments. When people want to preserve themselves and their culture, you realize they will go to any lengths to do it. I witnessed some of those lengths myself, and other colleagues witnessed those and were the targets of very emboldened and brazen opposing forces. I decided then, as I decide every day, to go into my secret war room. I personally choose to whisper and not to shout. I may not be on the front lines of the marches and the sit-ins. I may not be locked arm in arm, refusing to leave with police dogs and batons and public safety pulling me away, or I may not be tear gassed. I may not be in those roles and in those positions. There is someone there for that. There is someone purpose to start that. I'm a strategist. I'm a person who I like to think through the opposition. So now, sitting in my seat as an at-large council member, I am supporting others who are choosing their pathway of civil disobedience. I ask them to reflect on the same questions that I ask myself. How great is your sacrifice? Who are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to sacrifice? Having gone through my personal life, professional, social, and civic experiences, I will honestly tell you that the early years of Trinae, the early days of Trinae the politician who started down this pathway, Trinae today is unapologetically Black, strong, empowered, and walking in my purpose wherever it leads me. But my civil disobedience, they shout and I whisper. Thank you.
Thank you, Trenae. That was very inspiring. And I'm sorry that we're not all in person to be able to have resounding applause, right? We have to, everybody go and do your reactions there. We can do applause in our reactions, right? I love that little icon. Oh, there you go. Yes, we can hear it. We can hear it. Yeah, and you know, I think this idea about self-reflection, reflecting on our own strengths and what we can contribute to the fight for change, to interacting with others. What are our strengths? I think that's a really, really powerful piece of advice for folks to think about. And I want to open it up to questions now. You feel free. Okay, so I have Dr. Currier up first, and I just want to remind folks in the audience, if you want to type into the chat, if you don't want to ask your own question, type in the chat, or maybe type in the chat, I have a question, and then I can get to you. Okay, if you want to ask it verbally. But let me go ahead and start with Dr. Currier from the sociology department.
Yes.
Hello, Trinae. It's so good to see you again. I've seen her many times over my 10 years here. You are an advocate for every oppressed group that I know of. I mean, I was at the Pride event with you a couple years ago, and I've been in the Democratic Women's Caucus with you. I'm curious about how, as a woman of color, I know that you have had to deal with people, how do I put it, getting in your face or saying horrible things to you when you are in public, when you are giving a speech or when you are running a meeting? What strategies have you used to either diffuse the situation or deal with somebody who is just being rude or offensive when you are trying to do something productive? So
Right.
it's like,
I think for one, I smile. I smile and I carry a lightheartedness about it because I already know I've won. And when I feel as though they have to do that to me, my message must be important. My work must be important. It must really rub them wrong. So I must be really doing it right. And I continue in that pathway. I always did not start there. I've been one, my kids might say that, but I've never been one to shout and, and to really get back at someone's face. I've understood, and I had some family members. Some of what I said might have sounded like a little preacher message at some point. Dad in his later years was a minister. My uncle was a 50-year man. Took lessons from them on the peace within yourself, and that when there's opposition, what's the game of that opposition to get you off course. And so I really have just learned lessons from family members. And I always said my dad was the greatest listener. He would just listen and allow us to just come. We could vent, we could talk, we could be upset, but he would listen. And then he would give advice and he would respond. And so it someone really like, again, they come from a place where they're very passionate about what it, but I'm not going to let that pull my platform. And we proceed on. And it's difficult. So I won't say it's difficult, but it's a practice thing, a learn thing. So.
Great, thank you. I have a question from one of our Randolph College students. Josh, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. My name's Josh Belofko. I'm a history major, American Culture Studies minor. So I think about Dr. King's mountaintop speech all the time, the speech that he gave before April 4th. And I'm wondering how I think about it. I think about the I Have a Dream speech all the time too. How do I think about his legacy as I enter movements for social justice today? How do I move forward?
I think, Dr. King fought on so many fronts for everyone, for all of us. And the equality and the equity of the races, his vision of seeing all the children playing together. I think that has been realized to a certain extent. Could it be greater? Yes, but we have laws that protect the issues of race and diversity and gender issues. And so really what I gets ignored is King's, last couple of years, the economic justice. And so, he was really fighting for that economic justice for workers, for families, for those who lived in the poverty, and it got lost, I think maybe by intention of some people. But for me, whenever I'm talking to folks, I'm always talking about workforce, about education, about the jobs of families and the opportunities for people in poverty. And that's because that is our economic fight right now, our justice fight right now, our social cause. Everyone who lives in communities that earn $50,000, $75,000 a year, we don't see the issues of poverty like we see in other places. I mean, for us, a family here of about four or a single mom would have to make about $44,000 a year to really be able to help herself and her family or sustain themselves. And when you look at where our income, even just for Lynchburg, is at about 1,000, below where we need families to be. And so I think if you're doing the work, it's about policy. It's about creating the opportunity to get to those places in life where they will be able to sustain themselves. And then what I've witnessed and found, I worked in workforce development. Our economy, this country, it's all about the money. let's the haves and the have-nots, the folks who will never have to ever imagine themselves in poverty, and the laws that are wrapped around that. Some people get mad when you start addressing it, and saying, yeah, it really is about the economy, but it is. And the economics of it. So I would say engage yourself more in that, in this community or whatever community you land in, and see what are the policies, what are the resources being put in place, what are the social networks, not to keep people in poverty or in places where they cannot move forward, but where are those networks to propel them, and how can you support that? How can you further that? How can you connect people to those resources and or the groups? How can you connect them in the city? So that's what I would say is the next fight, and a place that you could start to learn more about if you aren't already there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Trinae. So President Bateman has a question. Go ahead, President Bateman.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much, Trinae, for a very inspiring talk. I especially want to thank you for naming something which I think is very hard for all of us, which is that physical violence has become a part of everyday politics in our country. Of course, for some people in American society, this has always been true. It's a reality that they have been unable to escape. But for many, many of us, we were raised to believe that ours is a fundamentally nonviolent society. And we must now face the reality that physical violence from people who disagree with us is a reality. And I thank you so much for acknowledging that for us today as we begin this symposium, and wonder if you had anything else you wanted to say about that reality. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. I think it is. I think for those of us who watched the past 4 or 5 years, especially people of color, it is a fear. It's all driven by a fear. And my experience of understanding how we got to this point for me is attending conferences 10 years ago. So many more years, maybe 10, 11, 12, almost 15 years now. When I was working for the school system, and I would go to the school board conferences or public relations conferences, and there would be folks there called, not sure the official name, but generationalists, who would talk about the data of our country and the populations that were growing and that kind of thing. And I remember sitting in, and this was years ago, and the gentleman who was the keynote said, by this time next year, there will be more children of color at 5 years old than white children, Black and brown children. And so that to me was the spark to say, uh-oh, that's not going to work out well for the people that realize it and know it. And so fast forward to several years ago, when you look at the things we were seeing, the policies that are put in place, and then at any cost, like I said, people will continue to allow language and allow actions and allow hostilities to occur against innocent people or just a group of people. It's a preservation move. And I always say that those who are in power know the future before we do. And so it's a preservation move. And so I think there's a desperation there when you result to that violence. But I also believe that again, I say we're better together than splintered. And in order to fight this that we saw happening, that we saw before our eyes on January 6th, and that what has tried to rise even in our around our area locally, I'll just go ahead and say that, and beyond. It's a togetherness that keeps us whole. And so that's where I when you talk about the preservation piece and the violence that we didn't realize, some of us saw this coming. When people say they can walk down the street and shoot someone in the face and no one cares, and no one, those, at every moment of those comments, they were not new to some of us. And I think when we really open our eyes and look at, again, history repeating itself, the playbook is not new. And so you have to go back and reflect and look at the playbook. And again, that spiritual awakening side says we are winners on the other end of it. And so, but we have to do it together. And that's where I think that comes from. It's out of desperation, it's out of preservation, but this didn't just start several years ago in our more recent years.
Thank you, Trinae.
Thank you.
So I have a question from Hanan Davis. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Hi, Ms. Tweedy. Thank you for your wonderful speech. So I had a question about, you were talking about shouting versus whispering. And I was wondering, in what ways does this whispering manifest? So in what ways can we as individuals apply this sort of tactic of inwardly reflecting and strategizing? I was just wondering if you could maybe give some examples of how to apply ourselves in terms of fighting this injustice.
I think when I say whispering, it is about the strategizing. It's about thinking what needs to happen, what needs to occur, what's your end goal, how do you want to get there, and then filling in the middle. So the middle might be, what are the existing policies that are prohibiting people or causing these issues? Are there things that can be changed? Is that being elected to an office and trying to lend your voice into how policies move forward, into the shaping of communities? It's learning. I would say in Lynchburg, we have a great framework of how to connect people and how to discuss issues. We have always been a city that scheduled meetings and talks and dialogues in order to hear each other. I think where we needed to get better was, how do we follow up on what we hear? How do we make sure that it's put into place? How do we understand how the funding goes to the causes that we want to see happen or put in place? What are the budget constraints? And where are the partnerships? I think right now we're in our era of social consciousness where it is incumbent on all of us to think deeper, to think more strategy, to be willing to put ourselves in a place of expressing how we feel and allowing people to understand our vulnerabilities, because this is probably, I mean, we've been in COVID. The first time I said, look, I'm Black and I'm proud. Okay, let's just go on and say that, because society puts us in boxes, and sometimes it's like we don't want to get out of that box, or we're afraid to, or we don't know how to. And so I think it's just looking at where you want to go, what does it take to get there, and filling in. And I would tell people government can be a friend. It's, some people like to make government as totally oppositional. I've heard, oh, government's worthless, government doesn't, but government runs the city. And in our case, Lynchburg, it's been run pretty well, very well over the years. And when there have been down times across the country, 2008 recession, Lynchburg has always fared well. And coming out of that. And it's because we have people that care. It's because we have people that consider others and what impact things have on our community, what decisions, what budget issues happen. So I would say fill in the middle by delving deeper into the things that shape where you want to go.
Thank you, Trinae. I just wanted to say, when you mentioned the idea of vulnerability, today in my social justice rhetoric class, we were watching and thinking about Fannie Lou Hamer's address to the credentialing committee of the Democratic National Convention. And one of my students just talked about her vulnerability and how that was so powerful when she was up there speaking to people and telling her story about what happened to her. So just the idea of vulnerability rings really true for me right now. So we have a couple more questions. I wanted to elevate, there was a question in the chat about about Lynchburg's progress from poverty and whether that's meeting the needs of our community and what more we could do. So I don't know if you wanted to mention that briefly, just the specifics about our community.
Yeah, I think in our community, we formulated a plan, we put it in place. We were able to get resources behind it, both at the local level and through some leveraging of state grants. And pre-COVID, we were in a good place of having classes, because what we realized was that we needed to develop a pathway for people to get to where they wanted to be, to get to their best selves, if you will. And that meant connecting the dots along the way. And so we had done that through the Poverty Bridges to Progress, and had people, families, individuals, up to 15 at a time, going through initiatives and connecting along the roadway, if you will, detouring off, connecting with an organization, knowing where they were. And then COVID, and so they classes during Zoom. It's nothing like in person. Where we are now is, what has COVID done to our community, to these same families? There are services, resources, safety nets, if you will, being put in place. But when that goes away, one thing I will say COVID did is it turned the world upside down in 1 year, to right side up, in my opinion, because now we have to build again. And it showed the vulnerabilities of communities. It showed the needs in a different light. It showed who was most who was most hard hit, and why, what are the reasons behind that? So when we study it all, when we look at the real-time politics occurring, this is the opportunity for us to get it right. No longer a social goodwill effort. It is survival of community, because we're all interconnected, interlinked, and tied together, whether you want to admit it or not. And so I, as hard and as just the bad of COVID, coming out of this, we have an opportunity to do better. I'll give you an example of that. When I've mentioned the families and that sort of thing. Some of the funding that came into our city, our economic development talked about, they had about $3 million that they had to get out immediately, and they had no infrastructure or framework on how to distribute that money. So we have a rock star economic development team, and they really strategize, pull partners together to distribute that funds. And she reported to us the other day a statistic: 64% of the funds distributed, of about 330 businesses, were given to women-owned businesses and veteran-owned businesses. And, although we had a great business network through different organizations, there was another layer of people who were being left out of opportunity and resources. And so now they are connected in. Our government, our departments know about them, they know about us. And it's on a level of help that allows people to get to their next opportunity. It saved people's businesses, it gave opportunity, but it also set a pathway forward in the future. And so that's how we have to do education and everything else. So hope I answered your question.
Thank you. That's really good to hear about our community and the recovery and the help that's taking place. So,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So one more question from Dr. Shipley. Would you like to ask your question? I'm really interested to hear the answer to this. So.
Thank you so much for your talk this evening. I heard you, and I heard your voice change a little bit when you said this. You said you have a poetic side, and the language you were using definitely sounded very poetic. And I was just curious about your thoughts about the role of creativity, imagination in social justice movements, but also in, in the context of our weekend in difficult conversations. Just if you had any thoughts about that.
Definitely. And yes, that poetic side comes through every now and then. And but what it allows, I think, is a space of no judgment, and for some, and as a people of color, as just generations, we've always used song, and we wouldn't have said it back. I'm sure the slaves didn't say the poetry of it, but the slave songs, the emotion, the creativity to get through has just been inherently a part of the DNA. And so I look at young people these days, and it's always been artists, creative type talents, sports, who use their energy and their emotion and their creative talent to express those things that society said could not be said when we talk. And so I think it is the creative movement, the creative space, and what it does for that opening the door and expression in a time when, people feel like they'll be judged, they'll feel like, I could be jailed, harmed, or people will take this wrong. That creativity space allows for you to get it out and say it. And I think as a society, people respect more creative space. And so that's why it's sometimes easier for people to accept the harsh, and for an individual, me, I think the first time I said, it's okay to do this, I was standing on City Hall steps. I had to give a welcome or they wanted me to say a few words, and it just came so easily. And I said, you know what? I like this when necessary, because you have raw emotion that you keep under, but the creative side allows you to express that. So it's good to me for the individual. It's good for the community and for the public.
Well, thank you for sharing that side of you tonight as well.
Thank you.
And thank you for saying that. I mean, that's exactly what I had in mind when I was thinking about how we could bring creativity and poetry into this workshop. So I hope that folks will join us tomorrow. We are perfectly on our hour time limit. Let's give another round of applause for our keynote speaker tonight. Really wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you. I will love to see you all in person soon, hopefully.
Yes, we hope so. And this is just the beginning of these conversations that I hope that we can have in our community on campus and in the larger Lynchburg community as well. And for those of you joining us from other places, right, this is just the beginning. Yes, and it's a good segue into the workshop tomorrow, beginning at 11 a.m. We'll be working with Leslie King about more on having difficult conversations, okay? We have a civility or decency and social media. Stop and think before you get canceled workshop. Then we have our poetry workshop and our meditation and breathing workshop. And tomorrow night, as Hannah reminds us, we have our open mic. And again, this is exactly what Trinae was saying about coming to a space of no judgment, expressing your emotions, saying things in poetry that maybe you couldn't say just in conversation with someone, right? So please join us tomorrow. If anyone has any questions, the information is on the website, and I wonder if anyone has the link handy and they could put it in the chat. That would be great before we leave. I don't have it with me, but perhaps someone else can. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. There it is, it's in the chat, the link to the Zoom and the conference for information. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Trinae. Wonderful evening. I feel energized. I hope you all do too.
Thank you all, and have a great
Thanks so much.
session. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much for
everybody.
taking the time out of your busy life. So we really appreciate it.
Oh, thank
And-
you.
So I guess I have another question. Are you going to run for mayor again?
Well, you
Or
know,
state representative?
what I will
Attorney General, state, yeah, go.
thank you. I
Yeah.
tell you where I'm at now, I wanted to come out and get some business experience. So I'm chief operating officer actually at VUL. And while I was mayor, I earned the MBA. And now I'm in the first cohort, the Doctorate of Healthcare Administration program at VUL. And so graduation in August. Yeah, I'm still in school, and I'm a glutton for education punishment, I guess. I don't know. But you have goals. And so I tell people, that's why I say wherever purpose leads. But I knew I just wanted to get some more credentialing and purpose and education under my belt. So I took a little breather, and
Took
if
a
life
breather
opens
and then
it to
working
me.
full time and getting a degree. Okay, that's the breather. Okay, well,
I know.
How is getting a PhD a breather?
No, I'm just telling you, like it is just it's an education experience that we have people in our the country, and it is very it's just very refreshing, and we reflect on leadership. That's why a lot of the time since I left as mayor, I've been able to reflect, and it's important to do so. My family, I have spent time more with them. I want to. And so I just say, whatever doors, I believe in leaving nothing on the table. So we're gonna go through doors that open, and we'll just see what that is in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank you,
great
everybody.
weekend.
Thanks for coming. Hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow. Some of you tomorrow.
Everybody, see y'all tomorrow.
Yes.
I'm gonna send you the recording of this as soon as it's downloaded.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Thank you, Justina.
All right. Great question, Hanan. Such a good question.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Bye. Thanks, Justina.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.